All the staff at INS believe that connecting to the community is important. Developing relationships has always been our success for over 40 years. We know that people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. We look forward to meeting you at the next Chamber event.
Thanks for clicking through to Chamber Web TV. This is Chamber Chat, and these are one-on-one interviews with business and political leaders in our community. And today I'm so excited because one of my favorite guys in this community to talk to about strategy and about business and about economic development and about trade. This is the infamous John Tennant, former CETA CEO, and more importantly for this particular interview, former Trade Commissioner for Canada. John, welcome to the Cambridge Chamber Studios.
Delighted to be here, Greg.
John, you and I have had a couple of conversations. We just had some off-air conversation about the Canadian-European Trade Agreement, CETA, maybe better known as the EU Trade Agreement. But this is going to be a profound effect on Canadian businesses.
This is an extremely important agreement. Of course, our largest trading arrangement is with the United States,
yes,
and it's covered by NAFTA. But that's an agreement that's now 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 21st century agreement, and it is broader and deeper than previous trade agreements such as NAFTA.
Well, so let's talk about that. The previous trade agreement with NAFTA, or the Canada-U.S. trade agreement that was originally, you were kind of up to your ears in it while you were trade commissioner, of course. And I think you were positioned on the other side of the border at that point, between Detroit and New York City, I believe. But you know, that was really specific almost to goods, and it kind of had phased in approaches to some of the goods and the trading possibilities. What makes this broader?
This seeks to cover a full range of business relationships. So, yes, it goes beyond simple trade in goods and moves to cover trade in services. And 70% of the Canadian economy is service providers. So this is important. It also covers labor mobility, allowing business people who are doing business in Europe access to visit Europe, and as well, where they sell something, being able to follow through with the warranty service.
Service or installation or whatever has to happen, yeah.
Business today is selling solutions, not just products.
We don't even have that with Alberta, for crying out loud.
This is certainly something that can be said. Does CETA, this new trade agreement with the Europeans, really trigger Canadians to realize that Europe may have better access to the Canadian market than Canadians themselves?
Now, don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. We've got 500 million people, 500 million consumers over in Europe.
Yeah.
We're 33 million people here. We're just this little dot on the map of population, anyway, or consumers, for that matter.
But just to continue in terms of the breadth of the agreement, a couple of other areas that are well worth noting are the area of getting mutual recognition of credentials, architects, engineers, supplying services. So discussions are underway to get mutual recognition of Canadian architects in Europe and European architects in Canada. That's going to help facilitate
really big.
things. Another area that's important is standards. You have products that have to meet standards in another country. Do your products have to be tested
is that like
in their laboratories?
Safety standards as well?
Those types of standards, absolutely. And under the agreement, it envisages that a Canadian company, Waterloo Region Company, can have the testing done by the authorities here in Canada, and that testing will be recognized in Europe.
That's very
big. There are all these kinds of, if you wish, non-tariff barriers, issues about mobility, getting into the service area that the new agreement seeks to address. It also takes a fresh take on dispute settlement and learns from some of the past ones and makes it, in effect, smoother, clearer, quicker. So that's why it's more comprehensive, and in some areas that were touched by the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA, it has a chance to go further, to go deeper. So this means that CETA, the agreement with the European Union, will be a model for future trade agreements that are negotiated, beginning with the agreement that the Americans and Europeans are just beginning to discuss covering
Yeah,
the
the
US.
Europeans are now going to say, well, hey, we just signed this deal with Canada, and this is the way it was. You know, why can't we do that with you? And then will that could that potentially change the NAFTA agreement?
Well, there actually are some implications. They're not ones that would affect the average business person, but when you conclude a trade agreement like NAFTA, usually there's some provision that if you give somebody else, as we may now be, the Europeans, a better deal, then the NAFTA partners will be entitled to it too. And so part of the agreement with Europe, looking ahead to the U.S. agreement, is that what the U.S. and Europe negotiate, if it turned out to be better than what we had, Canada would probably be able to benefit from it. But importantly, in the meantime, we've got a leg up. Canada has a leg up on the U.S.
Yeah, we can get in there first.
Well, Canadians now have access to the European market and to the U.S. and Mexican markets. Canada is really one of the very few developed countries in the world that has this dual access. And the European market, in terms of the size of the GDP, it's as large, in fact slightly bigger than the U.S.
Was it you that said their GDP alone is bigger than the entire Canadian economy?
No, what they import.
What they import.
What the Europeans import is larger than the entire Canadian GDP. So this is about potential. This is a market that Canadians have got lots of room to grow in. It's 500 million people now in the European Union. And what's important to think about, too, for a lot of business people is that it's 28 countries. And that's not just the Germany, the Europe, the UK, the mature, more mature, sophisticated economies, but it's many that have recently come into the European Union. Estonia, Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary. Countries of real opportunity, a number of whom have been doing quite nicely economically and represent opportunities.
Well, and that's the other thing. You know, the economy over there, as we know, has been, you know, a little bit of a thin ice issue. Is that a worry, or is that maybe actually going to help them rise up as a result of this?
Well, Canadian business, first of all, needs a diversification opportunity. Everybody would agree that we are somewhat too dependent on the U.S. market, and it has not been as strong for us as we would like. The European economy has been slow, stagnant, hopefully is going to return. But I would say that of those 28 European countries, if Waterloo Region companies take a look at it, they would find that they probably haven't been paying attention to all 28.
Yeah.
And they may have some penetration
There's some jewels there.
Say they may have some penetration in Germany or Italy, but have they really realized the full nature
Well, some of the
opportunity
emerging
bullet?
countries,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Estonia and
Right.
countries like that are, you know, really need that global marketplace to come in and help build up their country and create an economic. But, you know, I don't want people to run away who are with small, medium-sized companies, because you know what, this really is for you. The big guys got all of this under control. Really, what we got to be talking about is now the effectiveness of this agreement and how it's going to apply to SMEs in our region. And there is monumental opportunity here. And it's not too early, in spite of the fact that the Minister of Trade says, well, it's going to take a couple of years to get this all done and the T's crossed and the I's dotted. What you told me the other day, John, is, boy, oh boy, you better get in the boat right now and start paddling, because you want to be ready for 2 years, and it's going to take you 2 years to get there.
I think it's time to move right now, and not just because you need some time to be able to take full advantage of the opportunity when it arises, but we have some attention in Europe because this is a breakthrough trade agreement. And European business people have reason to think, well, this is an agreement with Canada. vis-a-vis North America, maybe Canada should be more prominent in my thinking. So that's one reason. The second reason is that it's time to take a good assessment of where you are. Are you in a situation of opportunity vis-a-vis Europe? But also, you need to be thinking the Europeans will have greater competitiveness in the Canadian market, and therefore are there things that you need to be thinking about defensively, as it were, as well. But I think the starting point is everybody should take a look at where they are in Europe in terms of the business they're doing, understand the degree to which removal of all tariffs, which will be the case for all industrial tariffs, most of them right away when the agreement comes into effect.
So not as phased in as the Canada-U.S.
A few more sensitive ones will be phased in.
I think the auto industry is phased in a little bit.
Yes, and that's because of some complexities, particularly on content there. But very few things to be phased in terms of manufactured products, industrial products. Agriculture, a bit more phase in, but even in the agricultural area, there'd be a very high degree of 0% duty when the agreement comes into effect, and then with phasing in. So this is a leg up for many people. In fact, of course, some things are already duty-free. Some things are maybe fairly low tariffs, but now's the time to have a look at what kind of obstacles you face in doing business in Europe, particularly the tariffs, make an assessment, and then start to develop the game plan that's going to bring you to
As they would say, you want to line those ducks up right now and get them in line. But, you know, we talked a little bit about the agricultural end of it, and of course that's you know, where the media focuses, right? They talk about the dairy farmers all ticked off because the cheese industry is going to be suffering because they got great cheese in Europe, and now they're going to be able to flood our market with their wonderful cheeses. But isn't there an opportunity for Canadian cheeses to go there?
There is, and in the agricultural area, Canada got some major wins. Of course, pork is one where much larger quota will be available, along with veal and beef and even bison. Take maple syrup, which is certainly something that's produced in this area.
That's pretty important to us.
The duty on maple syrup going into Europe today is 8%. When the agreement comes into effect, that's 0 immediately.
Wow.
So you have to ask yourself, is there an opportunity here? So while agriculture is an area where you find some more sensitivities, clearly a very good deal has been negotiated. Tariffs are also coming down in areas like pulses and other grains, and Canada does enjoy a market, Ontario does, in Europe. So there are very definite opportunities in the agriculture sector, although they're more defined, narrow, and often have to do with quotas.
But I think what you're really saying is, you know, yeah, on the surface, yeah, everybody's going to get a little afraid. They're opening up a market, but you know, really, they needn't worry about this. There's going to be a greater opportunity for them to expose their goods as much as compete with the goods that are going to come over here.
Right. And in the agricultural area, in terms of the political sensitivity, this agreement does not really challenge the basic structure of Canadian supply management in poultry and in the dairy industry. Yes, as you said, a larger quota for cheese, which takes the Europeans, when it's ultimately fully exploited, from 4% of the cheese market to 8% of the cheese market in Canada. But the basic structure of supply management remains intact, and frankly, I think the agricultural community in Canada should be heaving a sigh of relief that there wasn't a threat to dismantling the supply management system.
Now you were involved in your time. You were involved really deeply in Canada-U.S. trade agreement. You obviously saw the NAFTA agreement come in as well, maybe in different capacities. If looking at this trade agreement now and comparing it to those other trade agreements, and I know a lot of things have changed, and you know, we've got a lot more wisdom and a lot more understanding about how free trade really works. Would you say that this is a bigger deal than any of those previous deals?
Not bigger in the sense of the volume of trade that it will cover immediately or ultimately, though there's tremendous growth opportunities, and we need the diversification. What it's about is building a trade agreement that, an economic agreement that covers more fully all the aspects of business in today's world, where services are more important, where we need to deal with regulatory situations, where the movement of people is extremely important. That's what it's about, a state-of-the-art economic and trade agreement. And in that sense, it is the state-of-the-art agreement, and it will set the trend, as we've discussed before.
Would you say now then, if what you say is, once we sign another agreement with someone else, the current agreements kind of get to have that opportunity to participate in that, do you think that would have a negative or positive impact if the Canadian-U.S. and the NAFTA agreement was changed to include the human element and services element?
There is quite a bit of coverage in terms of labor mobility with the United States, but this has provided an opportunity to take it further. And there'd be no question that Mexican, Canadian, and U.S. officials will be looking at how to take NAFTA to the next level.
Would it be good for us?
It would be. And, of course, we're all engaged, the Americans, Mexicans, and Canadians, in this Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiation, which is the one that many people are really looking at as the next major deal. And CETA will set a template that will be taken advantage of there.
What a wonderful conversation, John. Right now we're just out of the gate at this, and you and I are going to have a couple of other conversations, because we're going to really need to engage our SMEs, because I think they're still on the surface. They're saying, I'm afraid somebody's going to come in and take my business, and I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to do business across the ocean. I don't know how to do business in another language. We're going to have to keep this at the forefront to help our members make this decision. But it's interesting to start the process of thinking right now, and to have you here with your extensive background is immeasurable, well, for both chambers in our region, quite frankly, and for industry. So, you're certainly open to receiving calls from any SME that maybe wants just that little advice, or maybe needs that little kick in the butt to say, yeah, get on stream and start thinking about this and start making some plans to do business there. We do chamber travel trips, as you know. And now, of course, our focus has really been started to heavily think about Europe, because, I have, certainly through my affiliation with the World Chamber Congress, I have strong affiliations with chambers of commerce all through Europe. They're much bigger than our chambers of commerce. They have 150,000 members instead of 1,500 or 1,800 or 1,900. But we also have a strong relationship with the Hungarian Canadian Chamber of Commerce as well, who already are over here. We've actually introduced a company from Europe to a company here who's going to manufacture and produce their product in Canada under license. And so those are exciting things that can happen right now, and we need to start looking at them as a friendly.
Absolutely. We've got to become more outward looking, and the Chamber can play a tremendous role in helping people.
Only with help from guys like you. And John, it's always great to see you, and thanks a million. I hope you'll come back when I ask again and talk a little bit more of this as it starts to roll out.
Be very, very pleased to. And as you said, be very pleased to chat to fellow members of the Chamber. I am one, and that's another good part of
Yep, John's a member of ours, so if you need to, you can connect with him, certainly on our database, but you can give me a shout as well, and I'd be happy to pass on the contact information to get John to get in touch with you so he can give you some of his wisdom around trade agreements and doing business with others.
Members helping members.
Members helping members. Thanks, John.
Thank you.